The Sunset Strip Diaries, Chapter 18, How It All Died. Journal entry, January 26, 1993. Went to the No Bozo Jam at the Whiskey with Bertie. Some guy bought our way in and bought us drinks. He said, "You gotta buy friends in Hollywood." Well, I didn't argue with that. There was a long line for the women's restrooms and, of course, no line at all for the men's. So we barged in the men's room and went into a stall. And Bertie got out her little Estee Lauder compact and put a bunch of speed on the mirror. I noticed there were chunks of brown stuff in it. I was like, "Girl, there's heroin in there." And she didn't care, and she went ahead and snorted all of it. Here we go again. Well, the drugs made her sit in a corner with her eyes bugged out all night. A bunch of our friends jammed on stage, and true to form, Leslie tried to do something cool and it backfired. The idiot tried to do a stage dive, and everybody moved out of the way instead of catching him. He hit the ground so hard he shattered his hip, and he had to be carried out and put into an ambulance. And mind you, this is the same place where Motley Crue did that Dr. Feelgood video where the big ambulance pulled up out front. Same exact thing, except for he really needed the ambulance. Anyway, back to the story. I went to visit Leslie in the hospital, where he was in traction. His legs were strapped into bars, and they were hanging from above him. He couldn't move, and I don't know exactly how this happened, but I actually started to fall for him, all vulnerable. I thought maybe I could really be with him. I started to open up my heart to him just a little bit. I thought that maybe I had been wrong about him. Maybe he was the one I had been ignoring and being rude to. He was always telling me he loved me, we should have babies, all these crazy things. I mean, I finally agreed. All right, let's be together. I was walking into a party one night soon thereafter, and looked up to see him walking across the street with a young, very pretty girl. I had, of course, a bottle of Jim Beam with me. I walked right across the street, right over to him, and tried to break the bottle straight over his head, but he caught my arm in mid-swing and he held it. I felt like such an idiot. I had been played. Not a good feeling. Journal entry, January 27th, 1993. Raz's dream has finally come true after all of this time. He is now in a relationship with Missy and is living with her. The other night, she and I went out because he had to go work for Princess Club, Glam Slam, driving somebody somewhere in a Rolls Royce. Well, when we were leaving, she wanted to stop by a liquor store, but it was closed. She knocked on the window, and they got a look at her, and they opened up the store for her. We drank beers in the car on the way to Hollywood. Then we stopped in a parking lot behind a restaurant on Santa Monica Boulevard and made these gnarly drinks out of Seagrams and Diet Pepsi. And once we were sufficiently buzzed, we walked down the street to the Troubadour and finagled in for free. Then we went to the Rainbow with a bunch of drink tickets, which she stole from Raz's pocket, my kind of girl. We got even more wasted and went to Del Taco afterward. There was a huge line of people, so we tried cutting in front of as many people who would agree to it. When we got to this sassy queen wearing no shirt, we were stopped. He wouldn't let us cut. We started disco dancing with him right there in Del Taco. He stuck his tongue in Missy's ear, and then he licked his finger and removed some flakes of boogers out of my nostrils. He said, "No one else will do this for you, honey, but I will." It was out of control. When it was finally my turn to order, I could not even speak English, and they took full advantage of it, because when I got my tray, there appeared to be one of everything on the menu, things I didn't even order or even know that they even had. I was like, what is this thing? What is that thing? Anyway, I went and put my mouth under the ice machine, and Missy pushed the button. Oh my gosh, this one guy tasted his soda and didn't like it, so he chucked it all the way across the restaurant, and it exploded like a bomb on his friends, like a water balloon. I took my tray of food outside and gave a burrito to a homeless guy who said, "God bless you." Then I gave some tacos to some of my friends that were outside. Saturday night I went to a party that I barely remember, and I just remember Jimmy's hands around Michael's neck and having Michael jump into my car and Jimmy throwing a beer at him and splattering it all over my car. That night was the beginning of my ritual of going to Del Taco after drinking all night. Eating fast food all the time started to ruin my figure very quickly, and that was really what I was riding on in that town. I was officially a has-been, washed up at 19 years old. I started hanging around bubbly Missy every weekend. I still idolized her, and I always had the best time with her. And I also felt safe with her, which was a quality, as you guys know, that made me cling to certain girls. I started to hang out with her so much that she told me she was going to kick Raz out of her place so I could move in. At first I thought, cool, I'd love to move in. Then I thought, oh, Raz would be crushed. He's been chasing her for years, and he finally got to move in with her. She's going to throw him out for me? Oh, he's going to kill me. He's going to be so pissed. Then it hit me. Screw him. In March of '93, I told Missy, hey, I will move in. She booted Raz right out on his ass. He was furious with me. He couldn't believe I did it. He asked me how I could do such a thing to him. I said, easy. The same way you became friends with my ex-boyfriend and completely betrayed me. Is that what this is about, Jimmy? And I said, why the hell should I be loyal to you? He couldn't believe I was as cold as ice about it. Missy really was comforting to me. I felt at home in her house because it was messy and lived in. And not only that, but she really was truly generous with me. Clothes, shoes, anything, food. She really did take care of me. She was like a mother and a big sister, and I really looked up to her. Missy's little duplex was well shaded and cool because it was blocked on one side by a huge bank building off of Ventura Boulevard, and the other side was full of windy trees. There was a little courtyard between the cottages with tons of little potted plants, lots of house cats lounging around, and flower beds. It was really fun living with her. I just loved it. I didn't bring much with me, so I only had one shelf in the linen closet for my things. She had posters of Perry Farrell from Jane's Addiction in her bedroom, and a missing persons album cover tacked up next to the toilet in the bathroom. The bathroom walls were also a huge collage of models from Vogue in different fashions, mostly Calvin Klein and Versace. She also had a lot of George Marciano's Guess advertisements on the walls, the black and white ones. There were tons of hair extensions lying around the place and bras hanging on the doorknobs, and the floors were wooden and the place echoed. We had barbecues with all of her dancer friends, where we filled the bathtub with ice and then bottles of booze. We played disco songs, we danced on the couches and the tables. Her coworker and friend, Liesel, ended up moving in next door at some point. She started to go out with us a lot. She was always really fun and wild when she drank, but was a mother figure in the day, telling us, okay, wear your sunblock, be safe. We all went to Raging Waters Water Park that year, hopping on inner tubes in the big wave pool, and crashing into people all day. We had such a great time in our unlined Zigans stage bikinis that were not made to get wet, eating Dippin' Dots and taking pictures in the photo booth. One night, Missy and I were leaving Cantor's Deli on Fairfax with some of our friends. It was about 2 in the morning, and some guys said something rude to Missy, and the guys we were with started fighting with them. We all finally jumped into our friend Dave's car, and we left, but the other guys jumped in their car and started following us down Fairfax. They were driving really fast and hard on our tail, and we could not shake them. So Dave said, everybody hold on, and slammed on his brakes. The guys behind us smashed straight into us, totaling their clunker car. We were in a Nissan Pathfinder, which I think was like a brand new thing at that year. So all that happened to us is that we got whiplash. Their hood was up like a tent, and steam was coming out of it. Dave yelled, everybody out! And the guys in our car each grabbed something to fight with and jumped out in the street. I had been in that sort of situation before, with knives and this and that, so I stayed put. But not Missy. She grabbed a skateboard, jumped out of the car, and started smashing the rude guy's windshield in. It was so late that barely any cars were even coming by in the street, and the ones that did just drove right around us without stopping. The guys jumped out of their totaled car, and everyone proceeded to brawl in the middle of the street. Missy was fighting with a guy, and he ripped some of her hair extensions out. I got out of the car and was collecting that blonde hair off the ground. I knew how expensive that was. Once the guys were laying there with X's over their eyes and little chirping birds flying in a circle around their heads, we all took off to get Slurpees from 7-Eleven. I will never forget looking at Missy with blood on her shirt and a Slurpee straw in her mouth. I wrote, "We have this philosophy. Don't stress about anything. We wait until the last possible minute to cough up money for bills. That way we have 2 months of relaxing and then 2 weeks of stressing over the stuff being shut off." It is not a very good philosophy, I will admit. Everything is cool except for the phone company is shutting off our phone on Monday if we don't pay the bill, and we don't have the money. The electricity is going to be shut off on Tuesday, same situation. I am in the living room at Missy's. The aquarium is making a relaxing sort of bubbling sound. We have one fish, Dre, and he's floating around by himself, and it's 12:30 a.m., and I'm watching a talk show about embarrassing spouses. The coffee table has my 3-pound weights, a couple of bowls with soup still in them, and a Michelob beer bottle. There are a bunch of nail polishes, old bills, and full ashtrays. The VCR is sitting in the middle of the floor because it's broken and Missy threw it across the room. I'm eating a sour pomegranate. Missy and I are very much alike. I think the reason we don't fight is because we never get too deep. We don't talk about anything serious. We keep everything on a cool level that I like and that doesn't stress me out. It was the first time I had actually contributed to a roommate situation. I did not have a lot to give, and I was always late with the money, but I actually started pitching in for bills and rent. I didn't want to use her or screw her over. We handled all of the bills in a totally irresponsible manner, of course, but she taught me about living on your own, about the process of bills, how often they came and what the minimum payments were, how much could you get away with, what wasn't acceptable. I went with her to the grocery store and saw how much food costs. I went with her to pay the rent to the landlord. I was learning a little bit more about how to be a grown-up. Every weekend I drove to Hollywood to pick Missy up from work. We drove straight to 7-Eleven across from the whiskey and got 2 partially filled big gulps of Coke. Then we would bring the huge cups back to my car in the Tower Video parking lot and fill the rest with Jim Beam from the liquor store. We sat in the dark listening to Dr. Dre's new album, The Chronic, which featured a new rapper called Snoop Doggy Dogg. We drank, laughed, and reapplied our makeup. After about a half an hour, we got out of the car and trotted down to the Rainbow and got even more trashed. There were many rock star memories that I only slightly remember because of the drunken haze in which we lived. And again, grunge was kind of almost all the way there, and there were still a couple people hanging on, and it was just a weird time. I couldn't do as much writing that year because I didn't have anywhere to hide my journals. And I do remember that Missy traded shirts with Slash from Guns N' Roses one night, but the rest is a blur. And sometimes we got there so late that the Rainbow was closing and people were leaving. We would just go mingle in the crowd in the parking lot next to the Roxy. We looked for our friends and found other places to party. But the Sunset crowds, like I said, were not what they used to be. The new scene, again, was called grunge, and I'm sure VH1 could do a better job explaining that shit than I could. Even the name sounded dirty and grimy. There was no glitter and most definitely no cool colors. Even their style of partying was different. There was no silly string or confetti or champagne being poured on your head. There were no balloons or beach balls. I mean, the grunge guy's idea of a party was stomping into a dirty brown room, wearing a dirty flannel shirt from a thrift store with some dirty-ass combat boots. He would have a beanie over his brown curly hair and a goatee on his face. And after growling a throaty yell into the sky, he would then shoot some heroin. Then he would scream another powerful yell in the desert and then go kill himself afterward. It was depressing, to say the very least. And although Missy and I were leaning toward rap over grunge, we started wearing little tied-up flannels, combat boots, and men's Calvin Klein underwear peeking out from our baggy jeans. We plucked our eyebrows within an inch of their lives to try and emulate the model of the moment, Kate Moss. The leaders of the grunge movement were the Seattle bands, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and many more obscure ones that somebody way cooler than me could surely tell you about. All of the bands had albums out the year or so prior, but they started getting more popular in 1993. I started seeing Pearl Jam at more parties and guys from Soundgarden at the Rainbow. My sister had the Nirvana CD because they had filmed their video for Smells Like Teen Spirit using many of the kids from her high school. Her friends were moshing in the depressing video. I listened to the CD to see what it was all about. It did strike me music-wise, but I didn't tell anyone. It actually made me realize all the sadness I held in my body, and it made me want to scream along with it. That was one of 2 or 3 CDs in our house because we mostly still had cassette tapes. So what happened to the Strip? Well, half of the people we normally partied with left Hollywood. They realized that their glam bands were being overlooked by the record companies for the new sound of grunge. They returned to the states from which they came with no record contract in hand. Others stayed in town and tried to adapt, landing jobs in the film or television industries. A lot of these guys work in the film, TV, and record industries now, you guys, by the way. They took off the tight pants, cut their hair a little, and took off their makeup, and it was weird to see the guys that had been in makeup and pink suddenly wearing lumberjack flannels and Doc Martens. There were a few people that stuck to their guns and wouldn't change their look or their musical aspirations, but they only looked outdated. With the exception of a few bands who made it in Japan, there was no place for them. No matter what look they chose, people who stayed seemed to be hitting the drugs. Many of them chose heroin. I blame the Seattle clique for that. Some of the party crowd committed suicide. Some went to rehab. Some of the girls in our crowd started working for a Hollywood madam named Heidi Fleiss, and others just completely disappeared. And surely many of them just went elsewhere and got new crowds. The glam rock hair band scene was over. And just like the rest of them, I was left standing at a crossroad. Would I continue on with these people? Follow them wherever they ended up, the few that were left? What would become of me? I didn't think I could ever live a normal life after all that I had been through. As I said, I was afraid of regular people, and I only felt comfortable with people who were wild, and I didn't know what to do, and I wasn't sure who would have me. I closed my eyes and prayed to God to do whatever He wanted with my life, and I figured He would know much better than I would. And the first thing that happened was that some guy at my telemarketing job told me he knew someone at a nice restaurant in Encino, and that I should apply there. He said he would hook me up with a job. I went into the restaurant the next day. I took an escalator, past potted palm fronds, up into a beautiful brick patio. Gorgeous people of both genders were walking around with handled shopping bags, and everybody looked so manicured, kept. I saw highlighted hair and pretty skin, tasteful nails and light pink and soft leather handbags, white teeth, delicate tank watches. And the men were wearing starched shirts and were clean-shaven and had shiny leather shoes. I walked through 2 huge glass doors and was immediately blinded by the sunlight pouring through the place. Half of the walls were also glass, and they let in natural sunlight. The other walls were mirrored. It was tidy and crisp-looking with glass tabletops over bleached white tablecloths. The servers were wearing burgundy aprons over white polo shirts and white pants. They all looked freshly showered and scrubbed. The place was the exact opposite of where I had spent the last 3 years of my life. And the next thing I knew, everything turned slow motion. This beautiful creature behind the counter looked up at me and we locked eyes. I saw thick dark eyebrows, smoldering honey-colored eyes, and short dark hair. He looked rather preppy, like a fraternity guy who played lacrosse or something. I asked him for an application, and he looked right into my pupils while talking to me. I felt sick to my stomach. I hadn't been nervous over a guy in years, but this guy was just striking, and so completely different than anyone I was accustomed to. It took me aback. I was very surprised at the reaction I had. My life changed in that moment. I had been waiting for something to make me lose interest in the people I was keeping company with. But nothing was as interesting, so I kept going back. But now there was this new possibility. I actually found a normal-looking guy attractive. I would simply start dating him, and then record scratching sound. It suddenly dawned on me. My shoulders dropped a little as I stood with the application in my hand, and he went back to packaging a to-go order into paper bags. He wanted nothing to do with me. I looked at myself in the mirror next to us. My makeup suddenly appeared very heavy. My hair looked dull and brittle. I'd gained weight from all of those late nights at Del Taco. I looked dirty and bloated. I did not know how to groom myself properly. I looked completely unkempt. I was no longer fresh or beautiful. I had become a sloppy drunk during my nights out with Missy, and on any given night, I was a slurring, foul-mouthed, ill-mannered person with a complete lack of morality. I did whatever I wanted and indulged in any behavior I felt like. I gave in to any impulse I had. There were times when that was awesome. If somebody was an asshole, I said, "You're an asshole," right to their face, or slapped them. If somebody did me wrong, I just punched them in the nose. And hell, it was always great going to the store in my bright blue mud mask and my pajamas. But I had no pride in myself. I was violent and abrasive, cursing and yelling at people, throwing food or bottles when I became angry. I fell over tables, out of car doors, danced on bars, and then came crashing down. I was an embarrassment, a total mess. As I was leaving, I knew I had to change it up. I wondered, where will I go from here? What is next for me? Would I play it straight and become normal? Or would I get into even more trouble? All right, guys, that is the end of the Sunset Strip Diaries. Trust me, I could not fit this all into one book, or I would have. There is a sequel to this book called Confetti Covered Quicksand. If you want to get it right now, it is online. It's on barnesandnoble.com. It's on Amazon. It's on those ebooks. It's on Kindle. I am going to record an audiobook of it, but I have not as of yet. If you want to wait for it, I will put it up on YouTube. Thanks so much for listening, everybody, and thank you so much for your support.